This guy could have left a trail of bodies across the entire United States.
Absolutely.
It's an explosive new update on a murder mystery Crime Watch Daily has been following. An unsolved quadruple murder and counting.
Where are all the bodies?
Yeah.
An unstoppable serial killer.
He is a chameleon.
On the hunt for more.
There's probably more victims out there.
Could the wait for answers finally be over? Senior District Attorney Jeff Strolzin invites our cameras in once again.
Last time I was here, I asked you straight up, do you think this case will ever be solved? Do you remember what you told me?
I don't remember exactly what I said, but I'm sure it wasn't optimistic.
It wasn't.
I think the chances are pretty slim.
And now there's a bombshell breakthrough in the case known as the Allenstown 4. It was a crime as gruesome and heartless as it gets in New Hampshire's Brook State Park, where 2 barrels are discovered containing the remains of a woman and 3 young girls.
That's a cold, hard person, and you'd have to be to do the things he did.
For decades, the identities of the woman and 3 little girls in these police composites remained unknown, and who killed them became the ultimate murder mystery. Forensics revealed the unknown bodies in the barrels were likely a 23 to 33-year-old mother and her 2 daughters around the ages of 10 and 2 years old. But there was a 3rd child around 4 years old inside the barrels too, and not biologically related to the others. It's an interesting fact our investigative reporter Billy Jensen discussed during our first visit to the crime scene.
She could have been a stepdaughter, she could have been a family friend, who knows, or it could have been just a serial killer who killed somebody else and then decided to dump it with the other girl.
That's the million-dollar question, and really so much of the focus of the case has been on, who is that other little girl?
Within the last couple years, forensic artists rendered 3D facial reconstructions of the missing woman and children, hoping it will lead to information regarding their identity. But sadly, no new leads have come in.
We still don't know who our 4 victims are in Allenstown.
But now, a year later,
That was a big moment in the case.
a huge break in the investigation. And it begins 3,000 miles away on the opposite coast in Northern California, where Captain Roxanne Gruenheid with the Contra Costa Sheriff's Office is in the middle of her own missing persons case.
Our Crimes Against Persons detail received a missing persons case for a woman named Unsoon June.
Unsoon June, a biotech worker, is reported missing by a friend after she hadn't been heard from in months. Contra Costa County Sheriff's deputies tracked down her live-in boyfriend, Lawrence Vanner.
In Richmond, California, where he was working at a corner convenience store. They spoke with him and he agreed to come back to our office.
On the ride to the sheriff's office, Captain Gruenheid sits in the back seat of the patrol car with Lawrence. They strike up a friendly conversation.
Kind of where are you from? Just making small talk. He stopped in his tracks what he was saying, and he turned towards me and he got really close, kind of in my personal space in the back seat of the car, and he said, "That's none of your damn business."
His reaction is odd, but so is something else: his name.
The name Larry Vanner, or Lawrence William Vanner, that he provided us the name and the date of birth. There was no driver's license associated with it. There was no prior criminal history associated with it.
So who is this Lawrence Vanner?
The detectives asked him if he would be willing to go down to our records bureau and for fingerprinting, and he agreed to do that.
And when they run his prints, there's a match to someone else.
He was identified as Curtis Mayo Kimball, and he had been absconded from parole for approximately 12 years. Upon learning that knowledge, he was under arrest and he was no longer free to leave.
Cops then go to search his house, hoping to find clues to the disappearance of his missing girlfriend, Unsoon June.
We went to his residence to see if there was some, if Miss June was perhaps in the house, being kept in the house or something like that.
June is not in the house, but when they pop the padlock on the garage,
What I could see from my vantage point was a very large pile of cat litter, approximately 3 feet high by approximately 4.5 to 5 feet around, of just a pile of fresh cat litter.
And then a horrifying discovery sticking out from under the pile of litter.
A mummified human foot.
The badly decomposed body is transported to the coroner's office.
An autopsy was performed. The victim had suffered from blunt force trauma to the head and dismemberment.
A couple of weeks later, the victim is identified as the missing Eun Soon Jun. Her boyfriend, Loris Vanner, also known as Curtis Kimball, is charged with killing his girlfriend. He pleads guilty to second-degree murder and is sentenced to 15 years to life. And while prosecutors and police are certain they got their man, they still aren't certain exactly who their man is.
There were numerous AKAs, there were numerous social security numbers, numerous dates of birth that he had been using. The investigators at the time tried to ascertain a true identity on him.
In California alone, this convicted murderer has used the aliases Lawrence Vanner, Curtis Kimball, and another name, Gordon Jensen, an alias the drifter began using when he skipped out on parole.
What was the parole violation for?
Was for abandoning a child under the age of 14.
And just who was that child? Her name was Lisa, a 5-year-old girl living with a man then known as Gordon Jensen at a trailer park in Santa Cruz, California.
At the time, everyone believed he was the father. That's what he said.
And whatever happened to his little girl, Lisa?
Lisa was put into foster care and was adopted.
But after learning so much about this convicted murderer's legacy of lies, Captain Gruenheid gets a gut feeling.
I didn't believe that he was related to her.
In fact, Captain Gruenheid worries that Lisa may have been abducted by the man with multiple aliases. That's when she alerts the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children and the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department, the same agency that investigated the abandonment case against Lisa's so-called father. And that's when San Bernardino detectives tell her about potentially explosive evidence.
They had taken a sample of her blood. I received a report back that was conclusive that Lawrence William Vanner or Gordon Jensen, Curtis Mayo Kimball was not biologically related to Lisa.
So who does she belong to, and what could it mean for the bodies in those barrels?
So Lisa wanted to know who she was, who her family was. That's when this process started of finding out who Lisa is.
A convicted murderer with multiple aliases sits behind bars in a California prison. But years before he was locked up, the deadly drifter abandoned a 5-year-old girl named Lisa. He claimed she was his daughter, but DNA tests revealed they weren't related.
The concern was that she had been abducted from somewhere.
Lisa's ancestry DNA is sent out for testing, and there's a hit. Turns out the abandoned girl is not from California. She's from New Hampshire.
San Bernardino called us, the state police, and also the Manchester Police Department and said, it appears that this lady that we've been trying to identify actually has family in New Hampshire.
And after some digging,
her grandfather, in fact, still lived in New Hampshire.
And he had a daughter. Her name was Denise Bowden.
And it came to light that that man's daughter had left Manchester in 1981 with her then boyfriend.
And a 6-month-old baby girl. Denise was never seen again. And as for her baby,
we were able to determine that Lisa was actually Dawn Bowden and her mother was Denise Bowden.
That's right, the one-time abandoned little girl has a name and a hometown full of relatives. So why didn't any of them file a missing persons report for Lisa's mother?
The boyfriend of Denise Bowden, he was able to convince the family that they owed money to everyone, and when they left town, they did not make a missing persons report because they believed that they were on the run from bad debts.
But who is Denise's boyfriend, seen here together in a rare snapshot? Turns out his name is Bob Evans.
Manchester began investigating the circumstances of Denise Bowden's disappearance and the connections that it had to this Bob Evans.
And when New Hampshire detectives compare photos of Lisa's mother and her boyfriend with photos of the California drifter who abandoned her,
it turns out from looking at photographs that this Bob Evans from New Hampshire is in fact the same guy who was known in California with another alias.
yes, And if you're keeping track, the drifter going by the name Bob Evans in New Hampshire is also known as Curtis Kimball, Gordon Jensen, and Lawrence Vanner from California. Leaving detectives with one chilling conclusion: Denise Bowden isn't missing, she's dead.
Evans killed her as well.
But where's her body?
Were you thinking that Denise Bowden was going to be the woman in the barrel?
It was a real possibility.
Investigators compared Denise's DNA with the woman's body found in barrels, along with 3 little girls. And the result?
Turns out she is not the person in the barrel.
Then detectives get a hunch and test Bob Evans' DNA against the bodies in the barrels. This time, there's a match.
He, in fact, is the father of the middle Allenstown child, the one that appeared non-related to the other 3 victims.
And not only is Evans the father of the 3rd child,
Putting it all together, we're convinced that he's our killer of those 4 people in Allenstown.
plus 2 girlfriends, Un Sun Jun from California and Denise Bowden from New Hampshire, putting Evans' body count at 6.
We don't think Bob Evans is his real name.
But investigators from both coasts believe that the man known in New Hampshire as Bob Evans is just another alias to add to an ever-growing list. And detectives tell our investigative reporter Billy Jensen that Evans is more than a murderer.
This guy could have left a trail of bodies across the entire United States.
Absolutely.
A serial killer.
We've attributed multiple victims to him. That is a great concern that there's others we don't know about.
So authorities are turning to the public for help. They want to identify the man who used 6 known aliases: Larry Vanner, Curtis Mayo Kimball, Gordon Jensen, and Bob Evans, plus 2 other names surface: Jerry Gorman and Jerry Mockerman. The Chameleon Killer resided in several states, but mainly New Hampshire, California, Idaho, and Texas. Authorities confirm that Evans lived in New Hampshire from 1977 to 1981, and all over the state of California from 1984 to 2002, up until he was arrested for murder. Also, detectives claim Evans had a specific MO: dating single mothers.
He does show a pattern of befriending vulnerable women and isolating them.
But before investigators in New Hampshire can interview Evans about all the new clues and victims, he dies in prison from natural causes. But there was one person who spoke to this cold-blooded killer when she arrested him for what she thought at the time was his only murder.
Nice to meet you finally.
Jeff Strolls and Roxanne.
Roxanne
Great to meet you.
Grunheid. Hi,
Roxanne,
Mike.
Mike Kikoski.
How are
nice
you?
to meet you.
Nice to
The investigators from opposite coasts meet for the first time.
It's interesting for me to actually meet somebody who talked to this guy, you know, because obviously with the picture we have of him is pictures, and you know, I've never heard his voice, so somebody who could turn in a moment, huh?
Turn in a moment, and then the connection between, you know, California and Contra Costa County and San Bernardino County, and bringing that to New Hampshire, and then connecting to your case, it's unfathomable to
And
me.
intuitively, it sounds like you knew you were just scratching the surface with this guy. And
Yeah.
just, you know, what was underneath, I mean, all these years later to come
Yeah.
out and coast to coast. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Crime Watch Daily reached out to Evans' only known living victim, Lisa. She prefers to keep her life private, but released this statement: "I'm so thankful to be reunited with my grandfather and cousins after all of these years. I want to send out a heartfelt thank you to all of the organizations and tireless individuals who made this possible." Lisa's statement continues:
Please turn your focus toward the unidentified victims and other potentially unknown victims in this case, and hopefully their families will also be offered some closure as this investigation continues. Thank you, Lisa.
With potential unknown victims all across the U.S., this case is far from over, and still 3 of the 4 bodies found in those barrels remain unidentified.
This case is backwards. Usually we solve our cases by knowing who our victims are, and those connections lead us to our perpetrator. Here, we know who our perpetrator is, at least who we think he is, but we have a lot more work to do to figure out exactly who they are, who he was, and who the rest of his victims were.
It's shocking that an entire family is wiped out and no one reports them missing. Now it's up to you, our viewers, to help piece together the missing parts for detectives. Here are 3 composite sketches of what the still unidentified victims would have looked like at the time they were murdered. If you recognize who they are, or you recognize this man, the suspected serial killer who was with them, call the New Hampshire State Police at 1-603-223-3856